Welcome to the Senior Rehab Podcast.
The podcast for rehab clinicians that want to better serve older adults.
And now, your host, Dustin Jones.
And hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Senior Rehab Podcast. I hope this episode finds you doing very well. Today on the show, we have Dr. BEN-FUNG with UpDoc Media. Dr. BEN-FUNG, many of you probably are aware of him. He's a very prominent social media physical therapist. He cranks out a lot of good content and is doing some awesome work with UpDoc. But he also has quite the career, has experience in several different settings and several different roles, and just a wealth of wisdom and experience that is very helpful for someone like me, and I hope it will be helpful for someone like you. But let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and get into my interview conversation with Dr. BEN-FUNG. Dr. BEN-FUNG, welcome to the Senior Rehab Podcast. I appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you very much for having me. Really excited.
Yeah, so you don't know this, or I've never told you this, but I first came across you. This was probably a couple years ago. I was working at a kettlebell gym, and I was pursuing a kettlebell certification through Dragon Door, which at the time it was the HKC, the Hardstyle Kettlebell Certification. And I was a home health physical therapist, which I still am today. But I was pursuing this fitness cert, not having a clue how I was going to incorporate this into my daily work as a PT. So I literally just started to Google kettlebells, physical therapy, and Mr. Kettlebelltherapy.com himself, BEN-FUNG, pops up. And
no.
Yeah. But it was great. It was great. So I just devoured your website and your content when I was first getting the kettlebells. And I just want to thank you because you really helped me kind of integrate the two into what I'm doing today.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's crazy because that's an old site that I don't even remember when my last post was there.
2013.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's still, it's timeless. It's green content. So it's still good for anyone listening that's interested.
That's awesome.
In that.
Thank you.
But let's for all the listeners that aren't familiar with you, could you just kind of give us an overview of your physical therapy career? I know you have quite the career, but just kind of hit some of the highlights and the path that you've taken up to this point.
Sure. Well, I graduated in late 2009, just the way the program unfolded. It was the winter of 2009, so I started practicing early 2010. And just to wind the kettlebells in there, that was actually my capstone project, which actually turned into a thesis because I ended up doing it alone through a series of events.
What school did you go to? Sorry,
I went to Azusa Pacific University. That's in kind of Inland Empire, Los Angeles, California.
Okay.
For those that know the area, it's by the foothills, by Glendora. And if you don't know that, then it's just basically inner LA.
All right, got it.
And kettlebells actually, I came across it from a martial arts seminar, and same thing, hard style kettlebells, and I was very skeptic at first until they just try swinging for 1 minute. And that anybody that hasn't done that yet, jumping into kettlebells and just trying that, and if you have, you've identified as wow, that's a really long minute. And
yeah,
so I knew there was something there. Yeah. So I just took it upon myself to investigate the the exercise phys ramifications of kettlebells. That became my thesis, and that launched me actually into the 2010 Baltimore ACSM conference. And
awesome.
I was able to present some of my findings, which were not necessarily earth-shattering, but nice to confirm that, definitely there's cardio, definitely there's strength, and there is a magic balance of, if you really want to be more cardio than strength, you can't use the heaviest weights in the world. But I mean, nobody was going to dispute that. It was just nice to have it there. And then I was surprised to, be cited repeatedly afterward. And I didn't expect that to be, a thing.
Yeah.
So then I took the most big U-turn possible. And, you figure kettlebells, I should be going to sports med. I should going to, martial arts PT, all that kind of hardcore stuff. No, I went to, level 1 trauma acute care.
Nice. Really? Level 1.
Yeah. And it was like, it was crazy. And, I got involved in the ED and, at first I was, they start out the new grads doing ortho, but I got looped into trauma because it was on the same floor. Then I got sent up to spine because they needed a primary spine guy. So I turned into a primary spine guy.
Wow.
They needed somebody to do vestibular, and, being fresh out of school with the strong neuro emphasis from my professors, I felt comfortable enough to at least know what is and isn't and where they should go other than me. But then, a couple Con Ed courses and, a bunch of hours later, I became the primary vestibular in acute care and, took that angle. And then, through a series of events, kettlebells came back in play. What ended up happening was I gave an in-service at the hospital-attached wellness center, and the manager there wanted to create a fitness, hospital-based fitness program through kettlebells, and then that took off. We were nominated as twice nominated as best in San Diego.
So was
up
it
against stuff?
Sorry, was this for patients or was this for employees in terms of the wellness?
This was for both. So employees, patients, and just healthy customers from that particular hospital system. And out in the community, everybody was welcome. It was basically a general fitness camp just based off a hospital.
Wow.
So we were competing up against CrossFit and all those other guys.
Yeah.
But it just had an interesting spin because I was able to loop in a lot of the PT knowledge and incorporate a lot of what PTs can contribute on that kind of wellness and almost like a primary care advisement level.
Yeah. Wow.
So that led to a whole bunch of other things. And, I was in kettlebells for a while. I started appearing in national conferences to talk on, spinal health and kettlebells as a PT and on local news channels. And then eventually I took another, turn and worked as a director of rehab for a CCRC, kind of primary SNF, outpatient and home health type concern. And then eventually into home health, and then now into, digital marketing, for PTs by PTs.
Yeah. And that just makes sense. Perfect sense. Home health to digital marketing. I mean, what else would you do from there, I'm just kidding. So yeah. I'm just wanting to get inside your head during some of these transitions.
Sure.
So you were graduating school, you just presented at ACSM, and you took this acute care job. What was your internal dialogue when you accepted that job? Why'd you go there?
Well, I went there because twofold. One of my professors that was kind of mentoring me out of school, saying, "Hey, look, if not outpatient, and if you have the opportunity to work for a major hospital, good reputation, wide caseload, and just a good medical experience, do it because you'll never regret it. You'll take it everywhere with you, and it will accelerate your understanding as a clinician for the rest of your life."
Yeah.
And the second part was, as I was looking out for outpatient jobs, because I still wanted that, right? I brought the kettlebells with me. That was my DPT thesis. That's what I was known for. I couldn't find an outpatient job in my area that compensated to what I felt was, equitable. Yeah. And I just didn't want to settle. I was already settling anyway, but I wasn't going to settle that far. So I was like, well, I guess I'll go down the self-education route and let's go for hospital work.
Yeah. Yeah. A previous conversation that I had with Matt Miller, he's a first-year PhD student at Colorado. He had his first job was acute care, and I was talking with him of how a lot of my professors told me that is an amazing first job out of school, just for all the reasons that you stated. But I was dumb and did not listen to them at all. And honestly, I don't regret my first job out by any means. I learned a ton, but now in home health, I could see the value in being in the acute care system of really, knowing the ins and outs and seeing how things work. But I think most importantly, of just really knowing what my patients have gone through before they see me. Because especially, in outpatient or just some of these outpatient services or even in home health, it can be difficult to really understand, the beast of the acute care setting. Because I only did 8 weeks in PT school, and I'm already forgetting that, and it was only 5 or 6 years ago. But super valuable. So from there, you went to the skilled nursing facility. How was that transition for you?
Well, quite honestly, it was rough.
In what way?
In probably every way.
Mm.
I'm not gonna lie. It was a challenge. It was a challenge I welcomed. But jumping in as an advanced clinician, or some systems would call it a specialist, or I don't know. Like I wasn't way up there. I just knew what I could contribute, and knew what I knew, and knew that I didn't know a whole bunch of things and needed to ask for help from those guys and gals. And going into a SNF, trying to jump up that corporate ladder a little bit and get some management experience. It was a whole nother tier of challenges. Being in a supervisorial role, that was a challenge. And then learning, both the culture as well as the financial patterns of running a SNF department as a business, that was a whole nother challenge. And then just the clinical setting of not being in the super fast paced, everything is, do, dash, or die of acute care, and slowing it down a whole bunch for that, for that SNF environment, that was a challenge too. And, I had to look over, 3 different, but both the inpatient, the outpatient, and the subcontract. That was a lot to kind of jump into, right out of a non-supervising role.
Yeah. Gosh, did you have kids at that point?
So yeah, that's what kind of ended that part of the journey. Was I didn't have kids. My wife was pregnant, and when did I start that job? I started the job, I think, in April, late April, and my son was born mid-July. So call it, for 3 months or so, I had, kind of a baby-free home environment, and I could really concentrate on that job, and I actually did well. I was able to combine the knowledge I was learning, from the MBA program that I was still doing at the same time, and really kind of did accelerate what the management at the time was considering my norm would be. They needed me to turn that place around financially, and we were able to do that pretty well. It was a good team.
So was your MBA, was it strictly online?
It was strictly online.
Okay.
And it was very, I guess it was a blend. It was an online MBA, but geared as an executive style MBA for people that have already been in the field a while and were in management situations. Yeah. So it was really convenient.
Okay. So in that managerial role, what were a couple of the big lessons you learned the hard way in terms of the business side of things?
Well, a couple big lessons. I would start with the HR lesson. Typically and I knew this going in, I guess I just didn't know it, right, until you experience it. But typically when you have a manager that hires you to be a manager, and that manager's pretty new, they're out to clean house, and they're out to, flush out the system and give us some new blood. Yeah. And so I didn't really expect, I guess I didn't expect that kind of challenge from that HR side, to need to deal with some of those, those personnel challenges. And it was a great learning experience. I learned so much about that. The other aspect of it was not really expecting to have to handle so much of this, I guess, the back end logistics as well as the finances. I expected to go in there and take care of the big picture, while some of the kind of the daily grind stuff was delegated, and the organization at the time just didn't want to transition me there quite yet, because I just got there. Yeah. So they wanted me to handle everything. So
what would fall into the back end?
So the back end, whether it's scheduling out certain things, or doing some of the billing stuff, and really maximizing billing codes and just utilization groups and whatnot, and planning a lot of that stuff out, because a lot of that can be automated. But when you do put that human touch there, you can really, the amount of profit, if you're talking just strictly business, you can automate it all you want, but you actually have a lot of loss of opportunity when it comes to some of those rug levels.
Okay. So what were some of the lessons learned from managing people or leading people? I guess some of the softer softer lessons that you learned in that position?
I think the softer lessons were probably more important.
Yeah.
Like, cause it's great. I mean, you can search up, billing and all that stuff anytime you want. But I think, when it came to leading, you always hear, right? You as a leader, you want to lead from the front, right? And it's, there's all these different cool one-liners, like, it's the, first boot on the ground, last to leave, and last one to eat, first one to serve. And I found that a lot of that, still rings true no matter what your title is and what level of management that you're in. All that still rings true because people are people and you're trying to lead them towards a united vision. A hard lesson was definitely, if there isn't that unity, some people can definitely be convinced, corralled, inspired, or incentivized to unify. And that was the other lesson that I learned was you don't necessarily have to have agreement to have unity. You just have to choose to go in the same direction. And so some of the team members got it, some of them didn't. And, some of our cross-departmental team members got it, some of them didn't. And eventually that decision goes typically to one office. And when that one office says so and you're in a corporate situation, you nod.
Yeah. I bet that was a struggle. What did you learn? Did you have to hire anyone or let anyone go?
I unfortunately did.
Yeah.
Have to, there was some let goes that apparently were pending before I even got there.
Okay.
It was already over the horizon, and I couldn't really do anything about that. It was one of those. By the way, welcome.
Oh my god!
This is part of week 1 or something like that. I don't remember the exact timeline. But I did have. Yeah, I do remember a wonderful opportunity to hire, a good amount of the team there, and that was actually a great experience. Interviewing from the other side of that desk, and being able to customize, my own personal way of touring and interviewing, offering, receiving the counter offer, all that kind of stuff. And there's some really cool people that came on, and they really were rock stars.
Man, that's pretty. I can only imagine just being in that position. I worked in a SNF, PRN, for it was like a year and a half, 2 years, and the leadership in the department. I mean, the turnover was just terrible, but just to see a lot of the things that they had to deal with, and just the challenges on a day-to-day basis, and from so many different facets was just, I couldn't even imagine. So, I really respect the people that do that work, but then do it for a long time. I just can't imagine.
Yeah, I know the longevity of, especially that level of leadership, I feel in the SNF environment, it does take a lot of grit, and you really have to take a look at that long horizon that you're actually building. You're building an entity, you're building a team, you're building an identity, and you're. It's everywhere. Everywhere, DORs, they jump back and forth, left and right. Yeah. At least in the San Diego market, there's kind of a little micro joke that every 3 to 5 years, all the DORs just kind of, it's like musical chairs. Everybody just shift one over.
Oh man, that's funny. So after the SNF experience was home health, correct?
Correct.
So what was that transition like, going from the leader of the physical or rehab department at a SNF to home health?
So that was truly, truly interesting on so many levels. So to complete that picture, what ended up happening was, I made the choice that between work, family, and finishing the MBA within the given allotted time, work just had to lose. So I resigned my post, regretfully, but I had to. And we took a sabbatical, and then I started looking around, and I just kind of put my resume out there. And what was interesting was, at the time, a lot of home health companies were just grabbing for talent, like any PTs, OTs. Primarily PTs with management experiences and with business credentials. They wanted them, and they wanted them now, and they wanted to keep them for later. It was they wanted to grab that talent pool and just squat on that until they needed to be called up to the front of the line. Yeah. And so I got cold called by so many agencies until finally, one I was like, wow, where was this when I was a new grad?
That's incredible.
and so finally I interviewed with a company in person after a couple of just screening out different phone conferences and emails. I was like, this one, they sound like good people. Sounds like a good organization. They made me an offer that I couldn't refuse.
Yeah.
And it was a really good offer. They wanted to keep me around for leadership purposes if I was agreeable to it at the right time. And then they threw me on my way with a preceptor because I did home health within a CCRC, but not home health proper. And they gave me a really warm welcome. I mean, I couldn't speak highly enough of that experience of onboarding me, giving me the training on how to do the crazy amounts of paperwork that's involved in home health, and all the various very critical sections, and just a lot of the hidden, I guess the hidden must-haves that are so obvious if you've been in home health, but if you haven't been in home health, you have no clue of. So I jumped into that for a while, and it was enlightening. I mean, there are certain times it was enlightening. I mean, I just didn't know that you could do healthcare this way, and I didn't know that there was a true environment where you could just deliver value for value itself, not for minutes at a time or the frequency of visits seen. And there were certain patients that they're like, hey, look, I got 15 minutes, make it work.
Yeah.
okay, let's go. Let's go, man.
Yeah.
And there were other ones that they're like, oh no, let's take our time. Like I need this to last 90 minutes. And sometimes I would roll my eyes like, oh my gosh, this one's gonna kill me. But it was it was great because that kind of closed the loop, right? Because it closed the loop from me being an acute PT, having done the whole gambit of ED, short stay, trauma, ortho, spine, neuro, oncology, ICU, cardiac, you name it, down to kettlebells all in the same breath.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
and
incredible.
then into a SNF outpatient, home health subcontract, which was basically just outpatient in an environment.
Right.
To finally going out to the rural areas or, I mean, one of my favorite stories is, I went down to the border and, I wasn't, it was a rough environment. I wasn't sure I was coming home that day because, the patient's grandson was like, don't hurt my grandmother.
Oh, wow.
I was like, I'll try. do you realize she's a total knee, right?
Oh, boy. That's crazy.
It was a great family. I mean, cool family. It's just, rough neighborhood, cool people.
Yeah.
But it was great. It was wonderful.
It's amazing. Just that last story of, I think there's so many advantages or I guess blessings in home health that you aren't aware of at the onset. And for me, that's one of them is I can go in some of the most, I guess, perceived hostile environments to where if I was just, walking or just driving around town without a purpose, I probably wouldn't go in certain neighborhoods of Columbus, Ohio. But the fact that I'm in, somewhat healthcare attire and I've got that badge on and they know that I'm coming in, to work with old, Betty Lou that's 80 some years old. It's amazing just the barriers that can break down and just the relationships that you can build with such different people, whether it's color, class. I mean, any differences kind of fall to the wayside when you're in there serving someone in their home, which is really cool to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's in their own home. That's probably the most amazing part is that welcome.
Yeah,
that I would say the vast majority of home health patients are just, oh my gosh, thank you so much for coming in here. Make yourself at home.
Yeah.
Take a couch, anything.
Here's some cookies. Pop. I mean, just so they're so generous. It's really cool. So you mentioned the paperwork. Were you doing actual paper work or was it electronic documentation?
So in the subcontract situation, it was a paper oasis, and that was special. That was special.
Did you get a cramp the first time you went after an oasis?
I got a cramp in my hand and in my head.
Yeah.
But in the home health proper, when I actually worked for an agency whose purpose was just solely home health.
Yeah.
It was digital. It was on an iPad. It was I believe it was I think we were using Devero.
Yeah, that's what I use.
And it's very popular right now, and it's is very customizable, which is why that particular agency chose to, work with that software company.
Yeah.
And I mean, personally, I liked it a lot. I was able to do it on my laptop at home. I was able to do it on the iPad they issued me. I didn't really have many complaints.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoy it. I mean, I think, like, yes, there are some things that I'm sure we could complain about, but I mean, it gets the job done for sure. So I mean, with all that experience, I mean, that is very valuable. But I would like to know, once you're in that home health environment, you've seen patients at so many different levels. If we take a step back and just think like bigger picture, what were some of the biggest changes in how you treated patients when you were doing home health compared to when you first started in acute care? How had you changed as a clinician?
Wow. Profoundly. Profoundly.
Yeah.
I can tell you for a fact, while acute care to this day remains kind of my clinical passion, I just love that environment. There's just some kind of high velocity element to it that I'm like, yeah, I could do that, just kind of do it for a day again, that kind of stuff. But I can tell you for a fact, my clinical mind in acute care was very focused on just that one admission. And maybe a little bit down the line, you make sure you do this until I hand you off to, say, outpatient or home health or SNF.
Yeah.
Kind of working down that line and finally, being in that home health environment really taught me how to look at people's lifestyle behaviors, and really kind of take a step back and go, okay, so they're like this because their lives are like this. And I need to get involved in some fashion in those facets of their lives so that they can actually experience, some true value in recovery. Versus in acute care, my biggest concern was, let's make sure these guys don't hurt themselves. Let's make sure they don't, be overactive or underactive, and let's make sure that their discharge plan is solid. That's kind of the, acute care bread and butter, I feel. So keep the patient safe and let's get them to where they need to go. In home health, they're where they are. They're where they need to be almost, and they'd be certainly benefited from going, quote, upgrading to outpatient should they desire, should their situation be appropriate. But that's where they are. And I really had to learn to kind of take a really good look at this isn't just for course of care. Everything I do here needs to have some type of lasting impact on their lives, at the end of the course of care, 3 months after that, 6 months after that, 12 months after that, so that it truly changes things from a lifestyle perspective. And that was different for me and still remains, kind of a mental challenge.
Yeah, it is definitely a challenge for sure. And it's humbling too. I think, especially coming out of school, I guess I'm just speaking for myself, but I was very idealistic and I was going to change lives and change behaviors, and everyone was going to be, healthy and exercising and eating well. And I would talk about these things in an outpatient setting and, with hardly any results. And then I go to home health and then just see how not everyone, but a lot of people live, in tough situations, whether it's physical difficulties or social difficulties, family issues, environmental difficulties. I mean, it's just so complex. And I think, just going along what you're talking about, it's really opened my eyes to the limits of my ability to impact someone.
Yes.
To where, I can only do so much. And I need to be okay with that, but not to say that I'm not going to try and change someone's life, but to almost, have a realistic perspective on, what can be done, in this situation. But it's
definitely,
but it's tough. It's tough for sure. So now, with your background in, martial arts, kettlebells, especially in PT school, you were mainly, around the more active population. You were doing pretty athletic things, and then you went, acute care, SNF, home health, kind of these more fragile populations. That's a horrible word to say, but I can't think of anything else.
Sure. How did
that kind of that higher intensity training, kettlebells, martial arts, how did that inform your practice as a physical therapist in those different settings?
Well, I guess the best descriptor is that they're not that fragile.
Mm.
Like there's, in every setting, I have stories of people that have blown my mind to what I thought going into that room or going into that home, that I perceived that they could otherwise do, like either through a chart review or just looking at them or talking to a family member. There's stories all throughout. Yeah. That, like, oh, well, I guess we'll be lucky if we can walk 25 feet, or we'll be lucky if we can improve the 5, times sit to stand. And they do much more than that, and they're climbing hills. And, I'm kind of I'm calling my director going, okay, I got to slow this down a little bit. Yeah. And, that kind of stuff.
Homebound.
No, we're at the edge there. What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's that whole gambit. And, and the other thing I'll admit right now is, I do come from that hyperactive, almost extreme sports background, kettlebells, surfing, martial arts. And that's not me personally. Like, I choose those things because I want to be better at those. But, I'm definitely more resonating with like a surfer, San Diego. I'm chill style. I don't want to work that hard. but I've learned that people can, and it's good for them. Yeah. It's really, really good. And not to limit how far we try to test people's bounds in their physical capabilities, despite their call it rehab condition or whatever diagnosis or impairment patterns, to at least give it a shot. One of my favorite memories from kettlebells was we had this 77-year-old, I think, join us for kettlebells.
This is in the group class?
7-year-old. That was in the group class.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, we'll try. And like, so what do you have with you? Okay, so you have a hip replacement and you have all these other issues, right?
Oh,
okay,
boy.
We'll definitely try.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, she there were times I wasn't sure I was going to be able to keep up with her.
Wow.
And she turned 78, and she was still just, she was swinging lead.
Yeah. That's impressive.
So, yeah, I think that's the biggest lesson I took is, just because we don't perceive them or they're not stereotyped to be able to be resilient and, even hard style or whatever comes to mind, capable, willing, doesn't mean we shouldn't try. And many times they'll surprise us. Many times they'll surprise themselves. And that's a really good thing.
Yes, man, I couldn't have said any better. And that's beautiful. And that's a very consistent message that a lot of people have said on this podcast. And I couldn't agree more, especially when we have the ability to monitor people as we're doing these difficult things to ensure safety, mainly, through vital signs and just keeping a very, very close eye on people as we challenge them that we are able to do it in a safe and effective manner. So I love that. So let's move on to kind of what you're doing now. Tell us about the venture with UpDoc Media.
All right. So UpDoc Media, I guess the best story is, call it Ocean's 11.
I can't wait to tell Gene.
Call it an Ocean's. Oh yeah, no. I joke about this all the time. It's actually credit to my wife. She came up with that mental concept. When I believe the story goes that Gene's out to create this media company, and Urson, having jumped on Therapy Insiders, they're looking at their needs and they want a blogger, they want a writer, and an editor. And so they approached me, and through this whole process, I was like, this is totally Daniel Ocean just grabbing these con artists for one big goal.
I love it.
And each with our own specialties and whatnot. And we did a pre-launch in summer of last year and broke our site with just the content we had.
Wow.
And I actually thought I broke the site.
That's great.
I'm chatting with my web developer. I'm like, did I do something wrong? I know I'm new to this particular platform, but did I break the framework? Like, no, you crashed it with traffic.
That's a good problem to have.
So that's cool. Yeah. Until we finally did our formal launch in fall. And so now, UpDoc Media, exists and serves that space digital marketing and content development needs for physical therapy businesses of all sorts, be it, primary, of course, clinics, because that's kind of the mainstay of our industry. But, it could be anything. It could be software, it could be apps, it could be educational services. And it's been a really cool journey because I get to work from home.
Yeah, man. And I love what you all are doing. If anyone has not, checked out Updoc Media, and if you haven't, I mean, you must have been living under a stone for the past year or so. But yeah, they're doing some awesome work, sharing some great content and helpful content. I mean, there's value in the posts and all the podcasts that are coming out. But I'm very interested in what you all do because you all are definitely changing perceptions of the public, but then also of other therapists, and just businesses in our field, and that's something I think about a lot in terms of geriatrics. This one of the big goals for this podcast is to change perceptions of how clinicians view and treat older adults, and I'm curious to know from your perspective, what are some of the things that we that are on this online space or listening, to this podcast, how can we be influencers in our profession to help change perception of geriatric rehab? What would you do?
Well, I like what you started is, what was the hashtag old isn't weak?
Yeah. Well, I screwed up with that because, it's an old, not equal to sign weak, but I can't do a hashtag with that because not equal to sign but
doesn't go through, right? It breaks up the character.
Right. I didn't think of that, but yeah. So just that phrase, just kind of sums up a lot of it. But
I think a lot of it, I think there's a couple things that come just right off the top of my mind. I think the first thing is, I think for a very, very long time, geriatrics was seen as, I don't know how to say it in a nice way, but it was kind of it was the one area that PTs kind of avoided going into school. Or like students going into PT school avoided. I don't know about geriatrics. It's just kind of, that's the last on my mind.
Right.
And I think we really need to change that because pretty soon, just as millennials are going to be the majority workforce in the coming years, geriatrics will become the majority patient population and customer base. Yeah. And so we really need to see them, as a truly valuable population of people that we get to work with. It's a privilege to truly work with them and to help them live their lives to the fullest. And that's really what they want to do is they know they're aging. Yeah. They want to age and be awesome, not age and be quote old.
Right.
I think that's part of it. And that's the other thing that I think you're doing a great job with this podcast is, you asked me about how my mental framework changed, and it's that very thing that just because they have age under their belt doesn't mean that they are weak. It doesn't mean that they are incapable. It doesn't mean that they don't want to try. It simply means they have years on us.
Yeah.
Boy, there's some geriatric patients I've worked with that, again, I feel like if we were going to go in a wrestling match, that guy would win.
Yeah.
Still,
sure.
And I think the last thing that we should, that would be great, would be, student outreach. I haven't seen a more dynamic and passionate generation of students than just the ones that are now, and just building towards now. I see the last 5 years, I categorize that all kind of as like a generational grouping. Man, they're so passionate. And it'd be great to see, just their own stories be shared within our PT community, and then to be shared into the wider communities of healthcare and consumers of just the awesome, fun stuff. Just as fun as it might be to say dry needle or do manipulations or swing kettlebells or to get a stroke survivor walking 100 feet for the first time. It should be just as cool to watch a 90-year-old learn how to break fall from a 3-foot drop and then Turkish get up with a 35-pound kettlebell.
Oh, beautiful.
Right?
Yes.
And I've done that because I still PRN at a CCRC from time to time.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
One of the first things I did was I got out the crash pad and I got a fall patient. I was like, okay, show me how you fall. And and it was pretty ugly.
Yeah.
And we tried it in all four major directions. I was like, okay, so here's the problem is if you fall, you're going to go to the hospital because you're going to break something the way you break fall.
Yeah.
And that's where we started.
Yeah. Yeah. And no one think that when people say geriatric rehab, they don't think that for sure. And I really agree with you in terms of sharing stories, of really changing perception through stories. And whether, I guess I'm trying to do that through audio. I think, we could do that through video as well. I've had a few people in, PT schools, some of the faculty that are very interested in changing perception as well. So yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a multifaceted thing. But I think the challenging thing for me is I'm just now realizing of how few people are, listening to podcasts on Twitter, on Facebook, in terms of the bigger population of PT and even the students. I mean, yes, there are a lot of students on social media engaging as professionals, but man, not as much as what I thought.
We need to get them on there.
Yeah.
Get all of them on there.
But the ones that I have interacted with, I agree with you, Art. I'm just amazing. I mean, absolutely amazing. And I know you all put on that guerrilla seminar at CSM, and I talked with a lot of the students that were there, and my gosh, I mean, just amazing people. They know what they want. They're going to get after it, and they're going to do amazing things. And I know a lot of them are very interested in the business side of things, but I hope, we can definitely generate the excitement to work with older adults as well. So we got to continue to make it sexy somehow.
Oh, old is sexy. It is the new sexy.
All right. Okay. Let me, we'll wrap things up. I want to be respectful of your time. Let you get back to your wife and beautiful kids. Let me ask you a couple questions.
Sure.
What would you tell your 25-year-old self, knowing what you know now?
Ooh, I would tell my 25-year-old self to plan 10 years ahead. And that to plan it in several tiers of flexibility. So that,
explain.
I'm 25, at least in 25, I was in school.
Yeah.
And, I would say, okay, so, what's your 10-year plan? What is it going to look like in, say, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, and then finally 10 years. And then from each of those, branch out kind of those possibilities. It could be, I'm going to go down this clinical specialist route with the possibility of swinging over to management, or I really want to get into management because I want to change policies, with the possibility of swinging over to entrepreneurialism, which is what I did.
Yeah.
And that way, what ends up happening is it's kind of like diversifying a financial portfolio. You diversify your mindset in what you're able to comprehend as possible realities and pathways for your progression in your career path. Okay. And that way you don't lock yourself into just any one thing and regret it,
Yeah. That's a good point. I know what my journaling exercise is going to be this weekend. So I appreciate that. Next question. Say you're a full-time clinician, regardless of the setting, what do you feel like would be some of your go-to pieces of technology or apps that would make your life as a clinician a little easier or more effective?
Wow. Whew. Go-to pieces of technology or apps. Well, one thing, and this is strictly a patient-facing thing that I do, is I have an inclinometer on my phone that also serves as a balance, like a balance bubble. And so it's not for me to actually measure degrees or anything like that, because I personally don't care so much about it. But it's a really nice, quick way without having to have a goney on me, and go, okay, hey, your knee is this, or your hip is that. And I can just show them. And the other thing I really like doing it is I hand my phone with this, little balance bubble, and I'll tell them, hey, look, hold that, keep it in the middle. By the way, you're standing on this while I, whack you with the wet noodle.
That's a good point.
So it's really patient facing. In terms of, I'm guilty of actually having been overwhelmed by so many clinician facing apps that, and I haven't been doing full-time clinical for a while. So I actually don't have the best repertoire recommendation
Yeah.
on which ones to use. I have some in I have some in mind, and I know that they're underdeveloped, but I don't feel like overtly endorsing somebody.
Right. I like
they're out
bubble
there.
idea. I have a like the app that I mainly use as a Goni, but I haven't thought about incorporating that into an actual intervention. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
advice.
sure.
All right, last question. Let's say we're at CSM. You have every geriatric rehab clinician in the room, and all eyes are on you. What would you want them to walk away with? What would you want them to know?
I would want them to know, and this might sound crazy.
Yes.
It might sound crazy, but I would want them to know how to train geriatric patients how to break fall.
Okay.
And at least I don't, I haven't talked to too many people that either are agreeable to this
Yeah.
or B, are aware, but we're so big on fall prevention, and that's awesome. We tell people to schedule out their their needs and go into the facilities. We tell them to do all these exercises, and we're really good on that front end. But I feel that somewhere, I guess in the psyche of a physical therapist clinical mind, if our patient falls, we have failed.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's necessarily the case, because I think that inevitably some of our population that are, at risk for falls, they're just going to fall.
Yeah.
And I think that it'd be very valuable if, an entire group of geriatric PTs can walk away with, hey, they are going to fall despite everybody's best efforts, even, the 100% adherent compliant patients' efforts.
Yeah.
But I've armed them with the best habits of what to do during the fall moment. Yeah. And that way they protect themselves, so they don't bust a hip, so they don't, break their radius, or, split their humerus in half, and all those bad things that, our human bodies are so reflexively programmed to do to protect ourselves. And there are better ways to train that.
Yeah.
And I think that would be powerful.
Yeah, I agree. And for the skill of breaking a fall, but then also the mental aspect of it as well, in terms of, man, I've had patients that haven't been on the ground for over 10 to 15 years, other than when they fell. And the fear that can come around that, and just the unfamiliarity with getting on the ground and the process of getting to and from the ground, I mean, it's just so fearful for people. And to see just their confidence improve when they know that they can even get on the ground on their own doing, whether it's a fall or not, and then get up, is just very impactful. And then to throw on top of that, even if they know they can break their fall, just has an impact on their performance, even, when they're just walking and not falling. Yeah. So I agree with that. I don't know if you saw this article. I'm going to butcher this, but it was this man, I think he was in his 90s, and he was going around to senior centers and basically teaching people how to fall. And he had just a crash mat with him, and he would literally just jump on it and just show people how to break his fall. And I forget what, I found it online, and I reached out to the author or the journalist that wrote this article to get this guy on the show. But he actually passed away this past summer from a stroke. But I mean, he lived a very amazing, healthy life and had a big impact. But I'll have to share that with you. You'll really get a kick out of it. They had some good videos of him.
Awesome.
But yeah, that's a good message. That's a good place to wrap up. So if people have questions or want to pick your brain a little bit more, where could they reach you?
You can absolutely tweet me at Dr. Ben-FUNG. That's just DRBENFUNG. You can also email me at ben@updocmedia.com. And if you so choose, you can call me or text me at 470-BEN-FUNG.
That is service with a smile right there. I love it. Thank you, sir, for your time. And anyone that has not checked out Updoc Media, check out their stuff. They have lots of good blog posts. They put out some funny videos every once in a while. The Star Wars one was incredible, by the way.
That was so fun. Yeah. It was so fun.
Yeah, and they've got a family of podcasts as well that just put out really good good content. What's the saying?
The content you need to know, delivered with clinical precision.
Boom. Right there. All right. Thank you, Dr. Ben-FUNG. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hit me. Thank you for listening to the Senior Rehab Podcast. The show notes for this episode and much, much more can be found at seniorrehabproject.com. If you found value in this conversation, please share this with one other person that could benefit. And until next time, do not forget to stay funky.